So good morning, everybody. My name's Anne Holmes. I'm an account director for SVL Business Solutions, and I'll be your host today for this webinar. I'd first of all like to say thanks very much for joining. Our webinar today is entitled Engaging with Your Human Workforce in a Digital Workplace. It's great to see so many of you joining us today for this discussion. We decided to run the webinar in conjunction with our WFM partners Teleopti, because we wanted to discuss some very topical subjects that we're seeing in the industry currently. So today we'll be discussing automation in the workplace and how that's impacting organisations today, employee engagement, and then we want to talk a bit about what the next generation will expect in the near future. So we'll be really interested to get your thoughts on that after the webinar today. We won't have interactive audio, but you can ask questions using the panel on your screen. Depending on time, we'll try and answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. But if we don't manage to answer any of them or all of them, we'll certainly follow up with the responses to all of your questions, and the discussions can continue, and we hope that you will continue these discussions on our Twitter and LinkedIn groups that have been set up, and the details of that is now on your screen if you want to take a little note of that. A recording of the webinar will also be available via these platforms. So I'd like to introduce you to our panel of experts today. So firstly, we have our very own Donna Baxter, who is our WFM consultant for SVL Business Solutions. And we have Ben Wilmot, who's a customer lifestyle manager for Teleopti. So I'd like to ask both Donna and Ben to introduce themselves and give you a little bit of background on their experience in the industry. And we'll start with yourself, Donna.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Donna Baxter. As Anne said, I'm a WFM consultant for SVL Business Solutions. I have worked within the contact centre, within workforce management, resource planning for the last 20 years. Not that I like to admit that, but I've started off as an agent and I've progressed my way through many different roles within workforce management, from real-time to forecasting to European contact centre management. I'll pass you over to Ben.
Thanks, Donna. So I'm Ben Wilmot, and I have always been on the supplier side of the software industry. So I've worked with a number of contact center technologies through voice recording, omnichannel call routing, but workforce management has been a mainstay of my experience through that time, and I've worked in a number of roles, deploying, supporting, and working with potential customers for Teleopti. So I've worked with in the region of 40 different organisations looking to implement or working with Teleopti WFM in a number of different verticals, and my current role largely involves working with existing customers and making sure that they're realising the benefits that Teleopti WFM can offer.
Okay, brilliant. That's great. Thanks very much, Donna and Ben. Before we start our discussion today, I'd like to run a quick poll with the audience, if you don't mind. So I'm just going to launch the poll on the screen just now. Basically just to say, does your organisation currently use any form of automation? So if you could just answer the question, just a straightforward yes or no, I'd be really interested to see what the results of that are. Okay, interesting. It's moving backwards and forwards a little bit, but pretty much we've been at 50-50, 60-40, still changing a little bit. Okay, we're still collecting responses. I think that's us now. So interestingly, it came out 55% of attendees have said yes, their organisation currently uses automation, and 45% have said no. So let's have a little discussion about that. I'll just close that poll.
A very interesting results. It's very positive on the automation side. A report from PricewaterhouseCoopers actually said that 30% of the jobs in Britain would be basically replaced by artificial intelligence by 2020. But as we're fast approaching 2019, don't think that actually is very realistic. But I'd like to take a step back in time. I was an agent 20 years ago for a travel company. And when I first started in the contact center world, it was very much a case of being chased out of after call. It was very much a case of you were at your desk on a phone, and the real-time team were very much policing your activity and what you were doing. So at that point, it wasn't a very much engaged workforce. Also, everything was being done on spreadsheets, from the forecasting to applying for holidays and shift swaps. Holidays had to be applied for on paper, and it was a 5-day turnaround. Shift swaps was almost like a word of mouth. You went and spoke to your team leader, and the forecasting was done on huge spreadsheets by the forecasting team, and things were forever changing. There was very little settlement with your shifts. So the staff turnover and the agent population was very, very high. But as we've progressed through the years and the introduction of technology with workforce management systems, that seems to have changed. And actually the culture of contact centers has changed over the years as well, whereby employee engagement has come to the forefront alongside technology. So really what seems to have happened is that sort of theory that technology is going to replace people isn't actually replacing people. What it's doing is those mundane processes, such as applying for holidays, shift swaps, looking for time off or some flexibility, is being replaced with technology doing that for you, allowing for a focus to be on not just the customer and meeting the customer needs, but meeting the employee needs as well. And it's given your agent population more accountability, and also taken us through that work-life balance sort of statement that is very much out there, and along with the employee engagement. It's less about policing and more about accountability and autonomy and engaging your workforce, as well as introducing technology to streamline that and make it a lot easier for the workforce management population. Ben, what have you seen in the marketplace that's kind of seen a change in direction in technology?
Well, Teleopti, as some of you attending may know, is a Swedish company. So I think the Nordics, it's fair to say, have had a focus on employee engagement and work-life balance a little bit longer potentially than in the UK. So we've actually really seen this play into our hands to a large degree. But Teleopti has been focusing on this since our company was founded in '92 and been at the forefront of some of this technology. Things like preference-based scheduling and fairness-based scheduling, which to a degree is introducing automation way back in '92 in terms of making sure that there's a balanced roster of shifts between agents on the same team or with the same contract, rather than relying on a manual step of trying to mix up those shifts to make sure there is fairness. And what we've seen as time moves on, and I think now the UK over the last sort of 5 to 10 years probably has caught up to some degree on those Nordic countries in terms of the culture of employee engagement and putting agents' desires and wants a little bit higher up the list, largely with a view to how that reduces the kind of shrinkage and attrition, which we'll talk about in a moment or two. But we're now seeing that very much into things like automated holiday requests, expecting to be able to take leave and have those requests managed out of hours and automatically by the system, into things like overtime and mobile apps. So nowadays almost anything that you want to do, you can reach for your smartphone to do that, and that naturally extends to working lives and to agents' lives working in the contact center. So it's become certainly something that's expected now to a large degree of workforce management technology, that there will be a level of automation, and that does extend beyond the employee engagement piece, of course, to things like forecasting and scheduling, other areas that Teleopti are working on, increasing the use of automation and reducing the amount of button clicking effectively to produce a result. But when we're talking about agent engagement, it's a lot around how agents can manage their own schedules in order to fit in with the rest of their lives, be that, you know, swapping with another agent, or simply moving breaks and lunches, or putting in their preferences for other activities.
Yeah, it's really interesting that what you're saying is with regards to almost enhancing the employee and the planner's functionality rather than replacing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that time saving isn't necessarily, and it will in some cases result in a drop in demand for certain roles, you know, across not just the contact center, but across the landscape. But I think that there's a lot of times where that freed up time can be spent on other things. If you don't have a mundane task of actually trying to facilitate a shift swap between two agents manually, and you know, doing that work may save time that you can actually use to go and spend time coaching those agents, or looking at how to invest that time in training, or planning better for what if scenarios, or other things that may fall into the planner's remit that they simply don't have the time to do if they're spending their day-to-day on mundane tasks. And ultimately that means that the better planning can result in cost savings in other areas, not necessarily in dropping headcount, but in being better prepared and providing a better service to customers, which, you know, a lot of organizations are recognizing as potentially a differentiator in challenging times, that actually providing good customer service is equally as important in some cases as the product that's being provided. And if you've got happy agents and time to spend on making sure that planning's done properly, then that's, you know, another result that we see and benefiting the organization as a whole, not just the agents. And it sounds like, Donna, you know, you've seen this trend certainly in the UK in your experience. And I suspect if we, you know, looked at that poll question and considered automation in terms of automating holiday requests, automating shift trades, you know, we might see actually that tip further from the yes to the no. From no to yes in terms of the number of attendees that are doing that.
Yeah, so let's have a look. Let's have a look and see if that's changed then, and let's just run that poll again. So if everybody wants to answer the question again, we'll see if that's changed following that interesting discussion and the interesting points made from Ben and Donna. So I'm just going to run the poll again. Give me 2 seconds.
I've beaten you to it, Anne, I think.
Oh right, okay, Ben. I was wondering there, going a bit funny. Okay, so the results are coming in. Okay, so it's changed slightly. Oh, it's still moving. So we now have a few more people. So we have 58% of people saying yes, that they do use some form of automation, and 42% still saying no. So that's interesting. Okay, just close that down.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to see that probably the people who are responding yes are probably in the same sort of train of thought as we've been, in the fact that you're discussing the holidays, the forecast, and the shift swaps is an automated process, maybe not what you think of as robotic, but which is generally where the automation side comes from, but more of a case of you're putting in a process that doesn't take that manual input. Apart from the technology and the changes, what we've seen with the employee engagement and offering these types of functionality that you mentioned, Ben, is that with engagement of your employees becomes loyalty, and to an employer, loyalty is key, in the fact that what that can lead to is a reduction in attrition. Because if your contact center is offering these types of tools and ways of offering flexibility back to the employee by giving them at the touch of a button or on an application that you can actually apply for a holiday or take some time off last minute, then that might actually make them feel like you're actually investing in them and not just in training and not just in coaching, but actually care about their work-life balance, which, as again, potentially reduces the attrition and also prevents that job hop mentality that used to happen in the contact center world. I'm sure it still does happen in some areas, but what we're seeing is the fact that if it's not just about hourly salary, it's not just about, people used to think, I'll go join this contact center, I'll work there for a while, if I don't like it, I can easily get another job around the corner. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. If your agents are getting sort of the ability to be flexible and balance work-life, then makes them a little bit more committed to staying with the organization and maybe even further in their career. As it's a very competitive world out there in recruitment, so that employee engagement can be the differentiator, and it can also make you an employer of choice, which is very, very important to contact centers and any businesses out there, that they can actually say that they are an employer of choice. It means that when they're advertising and they've got that statement, it actually could lead to people wanting to work for them. Ben, are you seeing any tools out there that maybe will help reduce the attrition and shrinkages that is causing potential attrition?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably three areas in workforce management, if you boil down to that really make a difference in terms of agent experience and their likelihood to stay in a contact center. I mean, as you said, ultimately, all else being equal, if there's nothing else to choose between one contact center and another, agents are going to be attracted to higher pay. And I think historically, as you mentioned, we did see that was the be all and end all. And if you could move somewhere else for an extra 20p an hour, that was going to look highly attractive. But I think, if you can offer a differentiator in how you communicate and work with that workforce, that can nullify to an effect, to an extent, the need to be necessarily the highest payer in the area in order to attract the talent and keep hold of it once they come to work for you. And mobile app, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to pick up your phone and find information and communicate with organizations, either as a customer or as an employee, is really desirable, and just beyond desirable, it's kind of expected. It is the go-to, especially for the younger generation, in terms of how they look to communicate with anyone or find information on anything. They're a lot more likely to go to their mobile phone even than turn on a laptop or even look at a tablet. So if you can simplify that communication, both in terms of giving them information about their shift, your expectations on when they will work, as well as things like their ability to book leave, to do the things that we talked about earlier in terms of shift trading. And if we can make it as easy as possible for them to understand when they're going to be able to find a slot to take holiday, or when they're going to be able to get overtime if they're looking for extra earnings, especially at this time of year in the run up for Christmas, that can be a real good differentiator. And we've seen customers who have introduced our mobile app to their agent workforce and seen real tangible drops in attrition, and not necessarily as a sole approach to the problem, but looking at that as a bigger part of an agent engagement strategy. But the feedback that we've had has been, for the almost universally overwhelmingly positive in terms of the impact that has on an agent's experience of contacting and communicating with the resource planning team. The other thing that really helps to keep hold of especially the kind of staff that you're looking to keep hold of, the good performers, the people that are productive and turning up to work consistently, is rewarding those good performers. So being able to easily understand who is following the schedule that's set out for them, good attendance, good performance, the traditional KPIs in many cases are still valid in terms of average handle time and call volumes answered, but also the ability to track other metrics be that customer satisfaction, net promoter score. We can track and monitor all of that from within WFM, and then start to reward, either through things like overtime and advanced access to holidays, or just through other, have a chocolate bar, whatever the case may be. Translating that into a physical reward, really helps our agents feel valued, and enables you to keep them in the contact center. And I think probably the last point, the one that is very often overlooked as far as benefits of WFM2 agents are concerned, is the consistency in experience that having a good schedule offers. It's not just about providing a good service level to the customers. That has the knock-on effect of actually meaning that when you turn up for an early shift, you're not worried that you're going to be absolutely swamped, because you know that it's always understaffed in the morning and you're not able to cope with the demand. The better you can staff to the demand means that there is a much better atmosphere. You know that the customer that you're speaking to is less likely to have been hanging on for a really long time to wait for their call to be answered. So if you can benefit the customer in that way, you also benefit the agent's work experience, and that really has a cyclical effect of happy agents more likely to result in happy customers. So I think that's often overlooked, and workforce management systems can be seen as a bit big brother in terms of the impact that will have on the agent workforce. But in fact, the fundamental reason that you employ a workforce management system to put the best agent in the best place at the best time actually has a positive impact across the board.
Yeah, definitely. I think it just takes away the concept of the policing, what you just said. It just takes that away now. It is definitely very much geared towards that engagement. And yeah, I couldn't agree more with the consistency of work experience. That's something that kind of gets overlooked quite a lot. But you're right, there's nothing worse than coming into that shift and thinking, oh, it's just going to be call after call, or I'm going to be mixed between calls and emails. But if I did the back shift, I'll actually be able to sit back and relax a little bit. So it's just so exciting to see that workforce management is moving in that direction.
Yeah, and would it be interested to get your views on what the future expectations are, because what agents are expecting today is as a result of what has come before, and as technology advances, as the ability to bring this flexibility into workforce management systems increases. Would be interested to get your perspective on what level of flexibility you think agents will expect over the next sort of 5 years as that technology evolves, as AI and automation really becomes a thing that's in the workplace day to day rather than something that's in the news. So we're launching the final poll for the webinar, which is what level of flexibility do you think agents will expect over the next 5 years? So no change to today, a bit more flexibility around when they take their breaks and lunches, or will it become the status quo that they will expect to have full flexibility around when they start their shift? Will they expect to be able to slide their shifts later in the day or bring their shifts earlier in the day if that fits in better with their with their life balance? So interesting so far. It seems 100% are expecting full flexibility of those voted, including start and end time of shifts. So and again, I think that's reflective of what we're seeing in the marketplace. And Donna, does that surprise you that level of response in terms of 100% for full flexibility?
Absolutely, no, definitely. It's kind of what it's even with studies and papers that are being sort of produced with regards to the next generation. It's definitely is what to be expected. Is that currently we've got a very mixture of the workforce, where you've got a workforce that's been in this industry for quite a while, and it's blended with the millennial sort of workforce, who are sort of a workforce who, if they get that flexibility and have the technology which you've kind of previously spoken about, they're very impressed, and it leads to that loyalty. The current millennials have kind of set the benchmark for flexibility. Traditionally, flexibility in a workforce came from a HR sort of direction and your European Working Time Directive. And that's who kind of set the precedents for that. And then that's kind of introduced now to being the norm, that you can request flexibility in shift times and start times, but it's not easy to always accommodate. Whereas we're moving towards the next generation, and Generation Z, who are very much they want an immediate response because they're of the social media age, and if for gratification they tap a screen and they get sort of a gratification, whereas they'll expect exactly the same response from if they would like time off, or even if they would like a coaching session. It's believed that Generation Z will prefer an ongoing mentoring sort of process rather than annual or biannual reviews, which WFM system will need to be able to facilitate. And I think that goes back to that again, as I mentioned, that sort of social media side of, if you put something out there, you'll get an immediate response. And that's what they kind of expect from their employers. It's the same as they're regarded as being impatient and have a fear of missing out. And again, that goes along with having that mobile app, being able to look at your schedule for tomorrow, for the next day, and look to see if I can make any adjustments to it to maybe accommodate the fact that I've had a last minute request to go do something with a group of friends. And if I can do that, then I no longer have that fear of missing out because my employer has been able to accommodate that. And that they want tools to help them to make those decisions. So along with the app, being able to see whether it's a traffic light system, that, yeah, if I'm going to ask, I've got a likelihood of getting that, rather than it's going to be a clear-cut yes or no. And so I think that kind of leads into maybe what direction Teleopti is sort of moving in. What's the next level in WFM tech that's going to be able to satisfy that?
Yeah, so certainly our expectations of future generations and future generations of contact center tie in, very much with what you said there, Donna. Increased self-scheduling is something that we're bringing into the product, and we're always going to be looking at balancing the other needs of a contact center. As much as you want to satisfy the agent demand, there is still the customer experience on the other side of the phone, or email or web chat or whatever the interaction method is, social media. So there needs to be a balance of that. But what we're looking at is understanding, which requests can you accommodate, and making it very clear to the agents which requests can be accommodated. So in effect, if you can move your break, move your lunch, slide your shift earlier, and have that done without making a negative impact on service level or the waiting time of customers, then we can allow that to happen. But again, allowing that to happen automatically without requiring a team leader or a resource planner to be unnecessarily involved in that process. Automation of rewards, so potentially unlocking some of that potential for high performers. Being able to reward those that are giving to what you need from the employer and from the employee rather, and giving back to those people specifically, helps to build that level of motivation, and also feeding into that ongoing process of management, but being able to, rather than having to sit down necessarily with your team leader every day to understand what you can do to improve and what your performance has been like, being able to provide that information to them so that they understand, even going into those meetings, what their historical performance has looked like, where there's that kind of room for improvement, and motivating them to make those improvements by rewarding them directly as soon as they do. And also, when it comes to how you interact with those things, at the moment we're talking about moving a shift, or trading a shift with an agent, or taking time off, but largely there are different routes that you're taking as an agent to get to the same point, i.e. I want to not be working tomorrow morning the reasons largely irrelevant. Could be because I want to go out tonight, and ultimately there are various routes that I could take for that today. I could trade shifts with another agent who starts later. I could use some of my time off or take unpaid time off potentially if there's the ability to do so. For tomorrow morning, I could slide my shift so I'd start later without involving another agent. But ultimately, it doesn't necessarily matter to me which of those I do if they're all available to me. And at the moment, I'd have to go down 3 routes to try and find which of those can I actually achieve. And what we're looking to bring in is chatbot initially, but potentially we're investigating bringing in speech as part of that. So you will just say, I want to have tomorrow morning off. How can I achieve that? And the system in the background will look at, well, we could achieve that by, are you prepared to take paid time off and take it out of your holiday allowance? Yes or no? Are you prepared to take unpaid time off? And by having that kind of conversational approach to achieving the actual aims, that's going to become a much easier experience. And again, it's going to become expected of contact centers and of workforce management systems, because it's going to reflect what's happening in other consumer technology. At the moment, speech recognition, Alexa, Google Home Hub, Siri, there's a lot of focus on interacting with technology through voice. So that's something that we're certainly exploring, just to make that whole interaction more human, in a sense, in terms of it's interacting with technology in a more human-like way. And it's, I think, inevitable that that's going to become an expectation within the contact center, because it's going to become an expectation across the landscape. That's how you'll talk to your car, that's how you'll talk to your fridge, your oven. That may change again in 5 years time. Maybe we'll be talking about thought control in 10 years time, or maybe it will go back to a more touch based interface. There are some of these things which are a little bit of a a phase, if you like, but that's certainly the way that the market is going at the moment. And I think while that's the case, it's inevitable that contact center solutions will need to follow the same trend to stay within the expectations of the generation that's providing the workforce with the contact centers with their agent workforce.
Sounds like exciting times. Can't actually wait to see this sort of thing in actual production. It seems like we've gone from the Back to the Future movie, we're now actually seeing it in reality.
I still haven't got a hoverboard though.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really, really interesting, guys. Really interesting for me, and hopefully our audience today found it as interesting as I did. I haven't had any questions. I don't know if anybody wants to ask any questions at the moment. We've got a couple of minutes if you want to ask just now. If not, then as we said previously, we have set up a Twitter feed and a LinkedIn discussion group where you can feel free to follow the discussion, continue the discussion, and ask any questions via those means, and we'll certainly come back to you. We'll also publish a recording of this webinar if you want to listen to it again or share it with your peers and your colleagues. I'd like to say thanks very much to our panel of experts today, Donna and Ben. I think you'll agree that their knowledge and experience that they shared with us today was great and very, very interesting. Lastly, thanks to you all, the audience, for all, for no questions so far, but hopefully questions to come, and we will answer. We'd love to hear all your feedback from today. And if any of you have any suggestions for subjects you'd like to see covered in future webinars, then we would love to hear them, because this is something that we'd like to do on an ongoing basis, if possible. So it'd be great to know what you would like to see discussed for anything in the future. So there's still no questions, so I'm hoping some will be forthcoming a bit later on. So all that's really left for me to do is to say thanks very much again to you all for joining, and goodbye, and enjoy the rest of your day.